Chapter 97. Xianxia was sent flying by the woman's palm strike. He flew over 20 meters before falling back into the river and sinking to the bottom. A look of shock flashed through Xianxia's eyes. The woman's palm strike contained so much power that even Xianxia was shocked. This palm strike had already caused him quite a bit of damage. Furthermore, where the palm had struck his chest, the bones there throbbed with intense pain. It was as if they were about to shatter from such a heavy blow. Xianxia swung his arm through the water and directly charged out of the water, leaping into the forest on the other side of the river. With a flash, he arrived behind a large tree that would require 2 people to wrap their arms around it. Saint force erupted from his body and directly evaporated the water droplets on his body. Afterward, he swiftly untied the space belt around his neck and took out a complete set of clothes, quickly putting them on. Just as Xianxia finished putting on his clothes, his somewhat pale face suddenly changed and he immediately leapt to the side. Boom! Just as Xianxia dodged, the tree behind him immediately exploded. A ball of powerful and pure saint force flew out from the scattered pieces of wood. In the end, it struck the spot where he had been standing. As the soil was sent flying, a 2-meter-wide crater appeared in his line of sight. "You pervert! You dare peek at me bathing? I'll definitely kill you!" As a sobbing voice rang out from nearby, a red figure appeared in front of Xianxia in the blink of an eye. A jade-like snow-white hand with a ball of water-blue saint force shot toward Xianxia with an ear-piercing sound. Sensing the powerful saint force in the jade-like hand, Xianxia's face suddenly changed. He became unprecedentedly serious and saint force surged out from his body, gathering in his right hand. His right hand formed a palm and struck out. Bang! When the 2 palms collided, a muffled sound rang out. A powerful force surged out from the 2 palms and shot out in all directions. Xianxia's body flew back as if he had been hit by a heavy blow. He knocked into several small trees along the way before landing miserably on the ground. As soon as Xianxia landed on the ground, he couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. It turned into a bloody mist that filled the air. His face had already become incomparably pale. Raising his head with great difficulty, Xianxia looked at the girl in front of him in disbelief. He really found it hard to believe that the girl in front of him, who seemed to be about the same age as him, actually possessed such great strength. According to his estimation, the girl in front of him was at least a great saint master. Because Xianxia had fought with saint masters in the magical Beast Mountain range, he knew their strength like the back of his hand. With his current strength, he was already able to face a saint master head-on. However, the feeling the girl in front of him gave Xianxia was that she was an undefeatable existence. Her strength was far greater than a saint master's. Great saint master! Xianxia swallowed his saliva with great difficulty. As soon as he thought of the girl's age and the great strength she possessed, he felt a wave of disbelief. In the Kargath Academy, where all the geniuses of the kingdom of Jesson gathered, there were probably many people of the same age as the girl in front of him who had yet to condense a saint weapon and break through to the saint realm. The girl walked towards Xianxia step by step. Her fairy-like beauty that could be said to be unparalleled in the world was currently filled with anger and shame. Her beautiful and lively large eyes had already lost their original charm. They were filled with extremely strong killing intent as she stared fixedly at Xianxia. From the looks of it, she wanted nothing more than to cut Xianxia into 1,000 pieces. The girl wore a set of pink leather clothes. Her clothes were slightly messy, clearly having been put on in a hurry. She did not have the time to tidy herself up. Her long hair that reached her waist was casually draped behind her back. Her hair was dripping wet as water constantly dripped from the tips of her hair, soaking her clothes in several places. The girl walked towards Xianxia step by step. Her pink and extremely obedient boots stepped on the ground silently. Each step left a deep footprint in the ground. Sky-blue saint force surged out of the girl's right hand as a 3-finger-wide, 4-foot-long blue sword gradually took shape. The surging saint force within the sword made Xianxia's expression change. Xianxia crawled up from the ground with great difficulty. His right arm trembled slightly. The girl was just too much stronger than him. His entire right arm had been heavily injured from the clash of palms with the girl earlier. Jianshan immediately controlled the radiant saint force in the surroundings and quickly healed his wounds without exposing his radiant saint force. Due to the uniqueness of radiant saint force, Jianshan did not have to worry about the powerful girl noticing anything as long as the milky white light did not appear. Hold on, miss. That was a complete misunderstanding. I did not mean to peek at you bathing. Jianshan bitterly smiled as he was shocked by the strength the girl had displayed. Shut up, you pervert. The girl's beautiful face was ashen as her chest heaved up and down. Clearly, she was quite angry. As she spoke, she took a step forward and suddenly kicked towards Jianshan's crotch with her cute pink boots. Jianshan's expression changed. His body swayed slightly as he dodged the kick by a hair's breadth. At this moment, the girl's sky-blue sword slashed down with surging saint force. The sword slashed down extremely quickly, arriving before Jianshan in the blink of an eye. Jianshan twisted his body as hard as he could and quickly dodged. Even so, a long wound still appeared on his chest from the sword. The wound was so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood spurted out like a fountain, quickly dyeing Jianshan's clothes red. Ignoring the wound on his chest, Jianshan endured the burning pain from his chest and quickly retreated, pulling away from the girl. At the same time, the slender light wind sword appeared in his hand. Although Jianshan had seen the girl's body, it wasn't on purpose. He had already apologized time and time again, but the girl still continued to be so aggressive, wanting to kill him. This aroused the anger in Jianshan's heart. The girl didn't plan on letting Jianshan go so easily. Holding her sword, she chased after Jianshan. Her sky-blue sword surged with saint force as it pierced towards Jianshan's chest. Jianshan coldly snorted as a cold light flashed in his eyes. Although the girl's strength was much greater than his, he wasn't someone who would just give up without a fight. With a shake of his arm, the light wind sword left behind a silvery white afterimage in the air as it pierced towards the girl's throat with lightning-like speed. This sword was the fastest speed Jianshan could reach. Facing the girl who was much stronger than him, Jianshan didn't dare to hold back and used all of his strength. Facing the girl's sword attack, Jianshan didn't even try to dodge. Just as the sky-blue sword was about to pierce Jianshan's body slightly twisted, causing the sword that was originally aimed at his heart to end up piercing his left shoulder instead. Jianshan's light wind sword was already at the girl's throat. At this moment, a trace of panic appeared on the young girl's face. Her mouth emitted a magnetic cry of alarm. Then, she tried her best to twist her neck and narrowly avoided the long sword that was aimed at her throat. Even so, there was a faint trace of blood on her tender neck. A slight pain was transmitted from her neck, causing a trace of panic to faintly appear in the young girl's eyes. That pair of bright eyes actually revealed a little fear for the first time. Seeing this, Jianshan sneered. Although the girl in front of him was stronger than him, she clearly lacked battle experience. She had never experienced a cruel battle before, and now that she was in danger, she was panicking. However, Jianshan didn't plan on letting the girl go. The intense pain from his chest caused Jianshan to become even more vicious. The light wind sword turned into a blur as it chased after the girl. The girl's face became even more panicked. However, just as the light wind sword was about to pierce her body, the girl's body suddenly disappeared in front of Jianshan's eyes. When she reappeared, she was already more than 10 meters away. It was almost as if she had teleported. Jianshan was startled. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the girl who was more than 10 meters away. But when he saw the girl's pale face, he realized that using such a fast movement skill must have consumed a lot of her energy. Could it be that this is also a special battle skill? Jianshan thought to himself. You bastard, you actually dared to make a move against this lady. This lady will definitely not let you off. Being forced into such a difficult situation by someone who was far weaker than her, the girl was both shocked and angry. With a sweet shout, the girl's sword emitted a blue light as a powerful saint force surged out from her body and gathered on the blue sword in her hand. The girl raised her sword and shouted, "First form of the Imperial Water Style, Water Dragon Strike." As soon as she finished speaking, the surging saint force that had gathered on the girl's sword actually turned into an indescribable dragon in a short moment. It then broke through the restraints of the sword and roared as it charged toward Xianxia. Xianxia's face slightly changed because the moment the huge dragon broke free from the bindings of the sword, a powerful pressure came from the water dragon and pressed down on his body. At that moment, Xianxia felt as if he was carrying a 1,000-gene boulder on his back. Not only was it difficult to move, even breathing was difficult. Xianxia's face changed. In his current state, there was no way for him to dodge the attack of the water dragon. The only way was to take it head-on. But when he felt the surging saint force coming from the water dragon, he felt a wave of bitterness in his heart. This kind of powerful attack was far from what he could handle. Since you're so oppressive, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Xianxia's eyes flashed with a cold light. The light wind sword in his hand suddenly emitted a powerful sword chi that enveloped the entire sword. Soon after, the light wind sword left Xianxia's hand and shot towards the girl with lightning speed. Its speed was so fast that the naked eye couldn't even see it clearly. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of the girl. The sharp sword chi coming from the tip of the sword caused the girl's neck to feel a slight pain. The girl's face turned pale with fright. Previously, she had used a secret technique to dodge Xianxia's attack. Now, she had expended a large amount of saint force to use this water dragon battle skill. Under the continuous consumption of saint force, the saint force in her body was completely depleted. Facing the light wind sword flying towards her, she had no more saint force to dodge. In a moment of desperation, the girl immediately controlled the water dragon that was flying towards Xianxia to block the light wind sword. Suddenly, the water dragon that was flying towards Xianxia suddenly turned around and chased after the light wind sword. It opened its mouth wide and bit towards the light wind sword. But the light wind sword's speed was much faster than the water dragon. This time, the water dragon bit into empty air. At this time, the light wind sword was less than a meter away from the girl's neck. "How dare you attack the young miss?" At this critical moment, an old man's voice rang out from the sky. His voice was loud and resounding throughout the sky. Following the voice, a tall figure appeared out of thin air in front of the young girl, blocking her light wind sword. This was an old man. He was very tall and sturdy. Just his height alone was more than 2 meters. The old man wore a white robe and his shoulder-length hair was tied behind his head with a jade-like luster. The old man looked to be around 60 years old. He had a pair of thick white eyebrows and a pair of deep and sharp eyes. He gave people a feeling that he was as sharp as a sword. Looking at the light wind sword that was flying towards him, the old man's eyes showed a trace of disdain. He coldly snorted and a pair of strong hands suddenly appeared in the air. With only 2 fingers, he caught the light wind sword that was flying towards him. The light wind sword's powerful and sharp sword aura was actually unable to harm the old man in the slightest. Immediately after, the old man casually waved his other hand, and the water dragon that was flying towards the young girl came to an abrupt stop. In the next moment, it disappeared into thin air, turning into pure yuan qi that returned to the world. "Uncle Feng, quickly help me kill him." Seeing the old man suddenly appear, the girl's face did not show the slightest bit of surprise. She immediately opened her mouth and shouted. Her angry voice actually contained a trace of grievance. Chapter 98. Uncle Feng, why are you wasting your breath on him? Help me kill him. The girl behind the old man said in a hurry. Her large, bright eyes that were filled with anger gradually became moist. As soon as she thought about how Xianxia had seen her naked body and how she had been less than a foot away from Xianxia, the girl felt an uncontrollable rage and extreme humiliation, as well as some grievance. This was the first time her body had been seen by a boy since she was young. Moreover, it was a boy she did not know. For the girl who had always been conservative, this was even worse than killing her. Miss, since your Uncle Feng is unwilling to take action, let your Uncle Yun help you teach this brat a lesson. At this moment, another voice rang out. Before the voice had even finished, another old man in white robes seemed to appear out of nowhere. He suddenly appeared before Xianxia and casually swung his powerful hand towards Xianxia's chest. The old man's strength was unfathomable in Xianxia's eyes. Xianxia dared not be careless at all as he faced the palm strike. He immediately dodged to the side as hard as he could. However, as soon as Jianshan moved, a terrifying pressure suddenly appeared, pressing down on Jianshan viciously. Under the pressure, Jianshan's organs all endured a force of 10,000 kilograms. It was like a mountain was pressing down on him. Not only did it make it difficult for him to breathe, but it also made it feel like his organs were about to be crushed. As Jianshan endured the tremendous pressure, the violet and azure specks of light in his dantian began to flicker. However, Jianshan did not notice the changes to the two specks of light in his dantian. "Old man Yun, please wait." Seeing the old man who had already attacked Jianshan, the expression of the old man who was called Uncle Feng changed slightly as he called out in a low voice. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The old man who called himself Uncle Yun had already struck Jianshan's chest with lightning speed, even though it seemed like a casual palm strike. A mouthful of blood mixed with crushed organs was violently spat out from Jianshan's mouth. The old man's palm had completely caved in Jianshan's chest. Not only had the powerful palm force truly shattered the bones in front of Jianshan's chest, but even Jianshan's organs had been shattered by the old man's powerful palm force. The moment Jianshan was hit by the old man, two faint, indistinguishable rays of light, one purple and one green, flashed from his chest. After coming into contact with the old man's palm, they disappeared in an instant. Jianshan's body was also violently sent flying. The old man's expression changed slightly as he softly exclaimed. His eyes were filled with shock as he stared at Jianshan who had been sent flying. A trace of disbelief and astonishment appeared in his eyes. Jianshan flew over 30 meters before crashing to the ground. Large mouthfuls of blood and crushed organs continuously sprayed out from his mouth. His face had become as pale as a sheet of paper, without a trace of blood. Even his expression had withered. Seeing Jianshan still alive, the eyes of the old man who was called Uncle Yun flickered with uncertainty. In the end he said, "Good boy, you're quite lucky. You actually survived my palm strike. Whatever, I'll let you go for now." With that, old man Feng turned around and walked towards the girl behind him. "AI, let's hope you don't cause too much trouble." The old man who was standing in front of the girl, who was called Uncle Feng, whispered in a low voice. With a wave of his left hand, the light wind sword that was caught between two fingers flew towards Jianshan. Just as it touched Jianshan's body, it suddenly disappeared. "Young miss, let's go." With that said, the old man called Uncle Feng let out a loud eagle's cry. A large flying magical beast descended from the sky and landed in front of the two people. The anger on the girl's face still hadn't subsided. She anxiously said, "Uncle Feng, that person isn't dead yet. No, I must kill him today." With that said, the girl raised her sword and walked towards Jianshan. Obviously, she didn't want to avoid the fact that Jianshan had peeped on her bathing. "Young miss, don't cause trouble." The old man called Uncle Feng immediately reached out to stop the girl. "Uncle Feng." The girl didn't comply. Her beautiful face was filled with grievances. Her eyes were misty and it seemed as if she was about to cry at any moment. "Young miss, don't be so stubborn. It's getting late, we should hurry on our way." At this time, the other old man came in front of the girl and said in a very calm tone. With that said, the old man gently waved his hand and a large amount of Saint Chi wrapped around the girl's body. Then, he gently placed her on the back of the flying magical beast. On the back of the flying magical beast, the girl anxiously stomped her feet. She angrily glared at the old man who had placed her on the back of the flying magical beast and angrily said, "Uncle Feng, why don't you love Luaner anymore?" The two old men looked at each other. Their eyes showed a trace of helplessness. Then, they jumped on the flying magical beast at the same time. Immediately, a fierce wind blew. The flying magical beast flapped its huge wings and flew into the distant sky. In the sky, the girl stood on the back of the flying magical beast and looked down at the shrinking Jianshan on the ground. The resentment in her eyes did not disappear. Uncle Feng, what's wrong with the two of you? Why did you let that hoodlum go?" The girl angrily stomped her feet. Her face was filled with grievances and tears were already rolling in her eyes. Hearing this, the old man called Uncle Feng sighed. With his experience, it was not difficult for him to guess what had just happened from the girl's still wet hair. Young miss, that person is not simple. Right now, the clan is under great pressure. At this critical moment, it's best if we don't make too many enemies so as to avoid bringing disaster to the clan, Uncle Feng said. His voice was filled with helplessness. Uncle Feng, when did you become so cowardly? That bastard is pitifully weak. How could he be a threat to our clan? The girl angrily said. Young miss, that person really is not simple. It's best if we don't offend him. Although he is very weak, there is definitely a powerful force behind him. The one who spoke was the old man who had injured Xianxia and was called Uncle Yun by the girl. At this moment, the old man's face was filled with seriousness, as if he was worried about something. Immediately after, the old man slowly lifted his right hand that was wrapped in the long sleeves of his robe. On his palm, there were 2 deep wounds. Although the blood had already stopped, one could still see that the wounds on the old man's right hand, from the center of his palm to the back of his hand, had been completely pierced through by a sharp weapon. When the girl saw the shocking wounds on the old man's palm, her cherry-like mouth immediately opened wide. Her beautiful eyes did not blink as she stared at the old man's injured palm in disbelief. She cried out, Uncle Yun, you're injured. The girl's voice was filled with shock and disbelief. Uncle Feng's expression changed as well. He exclaimed in a deep voice, Old man Yun, you're actually injured? His voice was filled with disbelief. Uncle Yun slowly nodded and said, This wound was left behind by that brat in his early 20s. How is that possible? Uncle Yun, you're not joking, right? That bastard is so weak. He can't even defeat me. How could he have injured you? The girl immediately jumped up and cried out loudly. Old man Yun, how did the wound on your palm come about? Uncle Feng asked in a deep voice. His voice was filled with doubt. Old man Yun was also at a loss as he said, I don't know either. At that time, when my hand struck that person's body, a huge pain came from my palm, and then I was injured. As for what exactly injured me, I don't know at all. Uncle Yun gasped when he heard this. He murmured, This brat really is not simple. When I first saw his saint weapon, I had already guessed it. His saint weapon is also different from others. It's completely different from ordinary people's. There seems to be something inside that makes the saint weapon even more powerful. It's completely different from his own strength. The young girl standing at the side was also stunned by Uncle Yun's words. Fortunately, I didn't kill that brat. Otherwise, if he really did have some powerful faction behind him, I would have caused a huge problem for my family. Right now, I can only hope that the faction behind that brat isn't too powerful. Or perhaps he's just a lucky brat who obtained the legacy of a predecessor. Near the river, Xianxia lay powerlessly on the ground. His clothes had already been dyed red with blood. The old man's palm strike had left Xianxia extremely heavily injured. Not only had the bones in his chest been shattered, even his organs had been heavily injured, to the point where they were almost completely shattered. Now, Xianxia could not even move his body apart from his mind. This could be said to be the most severe injury he had ever suffered in his entire life. If it were not for the fact that he had cultivated an extraordinary mental cultivation method and had been using Saint Force to refine his body since he was young, causing his body's constitution and vitality to be far greater than ordinary people's, the old man's palm strike probably would have killed him directly. Chapter 99. The radiant Saint Force in the surroundings constantly gathered towards Xianxia, rapidly healing Xianxia's wounds. However, because Xianxia's wounds were just too severe this time, even the radiant Saint Force with its miraculous healing properties struggled to heal his wounds in a short amount of time. Controlling the radiant Saint Force was extremely taxing on Xianxia's mind. After 4 hours, Xianxia had used up almost 70% of his mind, forcing him to stop. Now, because he had used up too much of his mind, Xianxia felt extremely dizzy again, causing his eyes to become tired and drowsy. He was like an ordinary person who had not slept for 3 days and 3 nights, unable to raise his mind at all. After 4 hours of treatment, a small portion of Xianxia's injuries had recovered. his shattered organs had been nourished by the radiant saint force. Although they had not fully recovered, the shattered parts had already regenerated. All that was left was the broken bones in his chest, which were a bit more troublesome to heal. As his wounds were extremely severe, many of the broken bones had pierced into his flesh. As a result, Xianxia would pull at the wounds in his chest as long as he moved slightly. The heart-wrenching pain from the bones piercing into his flesh was basically the most severe form of torture to the brain. Xianxia did not want to experience this inhumane torture. As a result, Xianxia directly laid down on the ground and slowly closed his eyes, slowly recovering his exhausted mind. Fortunately, Xianxia had completely memorized the contents of the Azulite sword manual. There just happened to be a method of recuperation recorded in there. Using this method of recuperation, Xianxia's exhausted mind began to slowly recover. Xianxia laid on the ground for an entire day and night. He did not move at all, and his tightly shut eyes never opened. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, afternoon arrived. The fiery red sun in the sky had already reached the west, and the light it emitted had changed from the initial scorching heat to a gentle warmth. The sun was about to set. At this moment, Xianxia, who had been lying on the ground without moving for an entire day and night, finally opened his eyes. After a day and night of recovery, he had finally fully recovered from the exhaustion he had suffered. Looking at the sky, Xianxia did not hesitate at all. He immediately controlled the radiant saint force and began to heal his chest. As the radiant saint force endlessly poured into Xianxia's chest, the almost completely shattered bones in his chest began to reconnect. However, the speed was extremely slow. For hours later, Xianxia had no choice but to disperse the radiant saint force due to his exhausted mind. However, after 4 hours of healing, although Xianxia's chest had not completely recovered, it was still 70% better. It no longer had any effect on his movements. Xianxia simply sat up cross-legged on the ground and continued to use the method recorded in the recuperation chapter to heal his exhausted mind. Although this place was not far from Wake City, Xianxia considered that the dazzling white light emitted by his radiant saint force was too eye-catching. It would be very inconvenient to heal in Wake City. Although the radiant saint force was special and could only be felt by people who were also radiant saint force users, who could guarantee that there were no radiant saint masters in Wake City. Once someone discovered that he could control radiant saint force, with how rare and precious radiant saint masters were in the Tianyuan continent, there would be no lack of people who would come to invite him. If that really happened, the fact that he possessed radiant saint force would be exposed to everyone. Although this could temporarily bring him a lot of glory, and he would not even need to worry about the demon cores he needed for cultivation, Xianxia did not want to reveal that he could control radiant saint force like a radiant saint master. This was because he had a feeling that if he continued to hide the fact that he could control radiant saint force, it would definitely be of great help to him in the future. After 3 days of healing, Xianxia's injuries were finally healed. Afterwards, Xianxia left the place. After walking a few kilometers, he arrived at the official road and walked along it towards Wake City. On the official road, caravans and large groups of fully armed mercenaries passed by. Although Xianxia was walking alone on the official road, he did not attract any special attention. Although his clothes had 2 slashes and were stained with blood, in the eyes of the mercenaries who often roamed the Tianyuan continent, this was a very common sight. It could be seen almost anywhere, so it was nothing new. Walking on the official road, Xianxia couldn't help but think of the scene that happened 3 days ago in the river, especially when he was only a foot away from the beautiful girl. This scene left an extremely deep impression on Xianxia. This was because even if he added up all of his experiences from his previous life, he had never seen such a thing. In fact, 3 days ago was the first time he had seen a girl's body, especially one that was as beautiful as a goddess. However, when Xianxia thought of the great strength that the girl had displayed, he felt a wave of disbelief. This was because the girl only looked to be in her teens, at most 20 years old. Their ages were about the same, but at such a young age, she was no weaker than a great saint master. This kind of talent made Xianxia feel ashamed. Very quickly, Xianxia entered Wake City. When the guards at the gate saw that Xianxia was alone and that his body was covered in blood from the battle, they didn't charge Xianxia any fees. Although these guards were often greedy for money, the target of their greed was always targeted. After entering Wake City, Xianxia didn't wander around for long. He directly found an inn to stay in and immediately began to cultivate. Although he had advanced from a saint to a great saint in the past month, this level of strength was still not enough for him to protect himself in the Tianyuan continent. However, the strength that the girl had displayed 3 days ago not only gave Xianxia a lot of inspiration, it also gave Xianxia a strong motivation to charge forward. Xianxia paid enough for the room and stayed in the inn for 10 days. During these 10 days, Xianxia didn't take a single step out of his room. He hid in his room all day and relied on absorbing the energy from the monster cores to cultivate. Even his meals were delivered directly to his room by the inn's waiter. During these 10 days of cultivation, Xianxia's strength had increased by a lot. He had already reached the strength of a mid-level great saint. The saint force in his body was almost twice as strong as when he first entered the great saint realm. As the saint force in his body increased, the light windsword strength also increased by a lot. Even its toughness had become much stronger than before. After 10 days of non-stop cultivation, Xianxia had used up all the Class 3 monster cores in his spatial belt. He only had 2 Class 4 monster cores left. Xianxia got out of bed and went to the window to look at the sky outside. Because he had spent all day cultivating, Xianxia couldn't even tell the time. He could only rely on the sun in the sky to estimate the time. At this moment, the sun was shining brightly outside. There were no clouds in the sky for thousands of miles. The fiery red sun hung high in the sky, emitting a scorching heat. It was noon. Chapter 100. After leaving the restaurant, Xianxia went to the market and bought a dozen large gourds for storing water and a large wooden barrel large enough to hold a person. Additionally, he replenished his spatial belt with all of the necessities for daily life and wilderness survival. He also bought about 20 sets of coarse cloth clothing. After putting all of these things into his spatial belt, Xianxia directly left Wake City and headed towards the wilderness. Arriving at a small forest with no one around, Xianxia looked left and right. After confirming that there was no one around, he immediately took out his interspatial ring and took out the silver-striped golden snake. After that, he took out all of the gourds he had bought and placed them neatly on the ground. Looking at the 80-meter-long golden-striped silver snake that was only as thick as an arm, Xianxia's heart began to beat uncontrollably. Excitement welled up from the bottom of his heart. After staring at the silver-striped golden snake for a while, Xianxia took a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. Then he slowly walked in front of the silver-striped golden snake and took out the light wind sword from his right hand. Pooh! Xianxia directly pierced the light wind sword into the silver-striped golden snake's 7-inch scar. Immediately, bright red blood began to flow out. Xianxia didn't hesitate and immediately took out a gourd. Like lightning, he opened the lid of the gourd and placed the gourd's fist-sized mouth under the silver-striped golden snake's body and began to catch the blood that continuously flowed out. At the same time, a thick and pungent smell of blood drifted out and slowly spread in all directions. Smelling the thick and pungent smell of blood, Xianxia wrinkled his eyebrows and muttered, "This silver-striped golden snake is truly worthy of being called a rare beast. I never would have thought that just the smell of blood would be so thick." Xianxia's voice contained a bit of worry. He really was worried that the thick smell of the silver-striped golden-striped snake's blood would bring him some trouble. Under Xianxia's 50% nervousness, 30% impatience, and 2 people's anticipation, it took him a full 2 hours before he finally emptied the silver-striped golden snake's blood. As for the dozen or so gourds he had brought, they were already half full. According to Xianxia's estimates, the amount of blood he emptied from the silver-striped golden snake's body was around 200 kilograms. After carefully sealing the gourds that were filled with the silver-striped golden snake's blood, he placed them all into his space belt. Next, Xianxia placed the silver-striped golden snake's body back into his space ring and immediately left. Although the thick smell of blood from the silver-striped golden snake had become very faint after 2 hours, Jianshan couldn't guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents, so it was better to leave as soon as possible. Although Jianshan knew that his worries were unnecessary, in order to minimize the danger, he was still willing to go through a bit more trouble. Jianshan once again returned to Wake City. After resting in the city for 2 days and seeing that there weren't any special rumors, he once again left the city. This time, he didn't return to his original location, but went to a place that was the exact opposite of last time. After walking for nearly 20 kilometers, he finally found a secluded and safe area. He once again took out the silver-striped golden snake and began to dissect the corpse. Although he could still dissect the corpse in the city, the silver-striped golden snake wasn't an ordinary magical beast. Once he dissected the corpse, the thick and pungent smell of blood would once again spread out. Such a unique smell of blood would definitely attract many experts to come and investigate. With Jianshan's current strength, he still wasn't able to contend against the numerous experts in Wake City. Jianshan's dissection of the corpse went very smoothly. Although the silver-striped golden snake's outer layer of skin was very strong, Jianshan's current strength was much higher than before. Therefore, cutting through the silver-striped golden snake's skin was not a small matter. Jianshan carefully took out a blood-red object about the size of a thumb from the silver-striped golden snake's abdomen. Holding it in front of his eyes, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of a smile as he muttered, "This is the silver-striped golden snake's precious snake gallbladder." The color of the silver-striped golden snake's gallbladder was completely different from other snakes. Most snake gallbladders were dark green with a hint of black, but the silver-striped golden snake's gallbladder was completely blood red, just like a ruby. Jianshan took out a small jade bottle from his spatial belt and carefully placed the thumb-sized snake gallbladder into it. This snake gallbladder was very important. If he wanted to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body, this snake gallbladder was essential. Its usefulness was many times more precious than the silver-striped golden snake's blood. Very quickly, the silver-striped golden snake's skin was completely laid down by Jianshan. After laying down the snake's skin, the silver-striped golden snake's appearance changed greatly. It now looked like a long snake. The most precious parts of the silver-striped golden snake were its blood and gallbladder. Although the other internal organs and snake meat were also quite valuable, they were not important in Jianshan's eyes. Afterwards, Jianshan directly placed the silver-striped golden snake's body into his spatial ring, planning to do further processing in the future. After dealing with the matter of the silver-striped golden snake, Jianshan looked around and hesitated for a moment, as if he was hesitating. He stood there and thought for a moment. Finally, Jianshan clenched his teeth and took out a large wooden bucket that he had prepared beforehand from his spatial belt. He gently placed it on the ground, then took out the large gourds filled with the silver-striped golden snake's blood one by one and poured all of the blood into the wooden bucket. Now, Jianshan planned to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body in the wilderness. This was because the silver-striped golden snake's blood gave off a bloody smell that was simply inconvenient for him to use in a city with a lot of people. Very quickly, the blood in the large gourds was all poured into the wooden bucket by Jianshan. The 200+ kilograms of blood almost filled the wooden bucket that was half the height of a person. A thick and pungent bloody smell wafted out from the wooden bucket and hovered in the air for a long time without dispersing. With so much blood gathered together, the bloody smell was even thicker. It was so suffocating that Jianshan felt as if he couldn't breathe. The blood of some special magical beasts was completely different from the blood of ordinary magical beasts. The silver-striped golden snake's blood was exactly this. Chapter 101. Plop. Jianshan took off his clothes and jumped into the wooden barrel filled with the silver-striped golden snake's blood. At the same time, he took out the snake's gallbladder from the jade bottle and swallowed it. Not long after the snake's gallbladder entered his stomach, Jianshan immediately felt his insides churn. His stomach began to rumble uncontrollably, as if he was about to have diarrhea. Jianshan sat cross-legged in the wooden barrel. The silver-striped golden snake's blood had already submerged up to his neck, leaving only his head exposed. Feeling the cold aura coming from the blood, Jianshan slowly calmed down. Closing his eyes, he began to absorb the special factor contained within the blood according to the method described in the book. The silver-striped golden snake's blood contained a special factor, and it was precisely because of this special factor that his blood possessed the ability to detoxify. According to the book, if one wanted to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body, they would have to absorb the special factor contained within the silver-striped golden snake's blood into one's body, then fuse it with one's own blood. Finally, the blood would nourish one's body, allowing one's blood and body to possess an extremely strong poison resistance. Once the silver-striped golden snake's blood was used to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body, one would be immune to poisons that were weaker than the silver-striped golden snake's poison. Even if one were to encounter poisons that were on par with the silver-striped golden snake, although they would not be immune, they would still possess an extremely strong resistance, minimizing the damage done to the body by the poison or delaying the spread of the poison. Although the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body did not allow one to be immune to all poisons in the world, it was still enough to move Xianxian's heart. After all, in the Tianyuan continent, the silver-striped golden snake's poison was renowned throughout the world. If one were to talk about poisons that were stronger than the silver-striped golden snake, they would definitely be counted on one hand. Moreover, these poisons were extremely rare, just as rare as the silver-striped golden snake. Xianxian sat cross-legged in the wooden barrel with his eyes closed. His stomach was constantly rumbling, and the sound was extremely loud. If someone were to stand beside Xianxian, they would be able to clearly hear the sound coming from his stomach. Inside Xianxian's stomach, it was like a surging sea, extremely unsettled. At the same time, an extremely nauseous feeling came from the bottom of Xianxian's heart, causing Xianxian almost could not help but want to vomit. I guess the gallbladder of the snake was melted, and the bile inside leaked out. Xianxian resisted the nausea from the bottom of his heart as he thought to himself. According to the introduction in the book, if one wanted to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body, the most important thing was the gallbladder. The gallbladder and blood were both essential items, because the special factors in the blood that could resist poisons were all guided by the gallbladder. Only then could these factors be absorbed into the body. These factors in the blood were not the energy of the world that could be absorbed at will. If one did not have a corresponding guiding factor, then even if one had blood, they would not be able to absorb these factors. Although directly drinking blood could also detoxify the poison, it was only a temporary solution. It would not last long. Just urinating would cause these factors to be excreted, let alone cultivating the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body. At this moment, a warm current suddenly appeared in Xianxian's abdomen, and the temperature continued to increase. In a short moment, Xianxian's abdomen became hot, as if there was a fire burning inside. Following the sudden change in his abdomen, Xianxian's pores all over his body seemed to be affected and all opened up. At the same time, in the bright red blood in the wooden barrel, a trace of strange and special energy was like a small fish, slowly swimming into his body through the pores all over his body. Just as this energy entered Xianxian's body, Xianxian's originally calm expression suddenly changed. The strange energy that entered his body instantly changed from a docile little sheep to a group of ferocious tigers, madly wreaking havoc in Xianxian's body, causing him to feel intense pain all over his body. Crap, this actually contains the berserk element that is unique to magical beasts, and it's even stronger than the berserk element in monster cores. Feeling the changes in his body, Xianxian instantly understood what was going on. The energy of magical beasts all contained berserk elements. This was not a secret in the Tianyuan continent. However, these berserk elements were almost always hidden within monster cores. What Xianxian did not expect was that the blood of this silver-striped golden snake actually contained berserk elements as well, and this berserk element was several times stronger than when he absorbed the energy from monster cores to cultivate. Forcefully enduring the intense pain from his body, Xianxian's mind once again had an extremely bewildering thought. Why didn't I feel this berserk element when I drank the blood of the silver-striped golden snake? Sitting in the wooden barrel, Xianxian's body began to tremble slightly. the intense pain that came from every single pore of his body caused the muscles on Jianxin's face to twitch uncontrollably, and his originally rosy complexion began to gradually turn white. The strands of strange and special energy contained within the blood of the silver-striped golden snake seemed to be attracted by something and unceasingly surged into every pore of Jianxin's body. As the energy that entered his body continuously increased, the berserk element contained within also became more and more numerous, becoming more and more powerful. The pain that this berserk element brought to his body caused Jianxin to be covered in sweat, but he still clenched his teeth and endured it. At this moment, the two spots of light within Jianxin's dantian, one purple and one green, suddenly emitted a layer of weak purple and green light. At the same time, the intense pain that came from all over Jianxin's body suddenly disappeared without a trace. The berserk element that had been absorbed along with the strange energy within the blood of the silver-striped golden snake seemed to have received an indescribable suction force. As soon as it entered Jianxin's body, it immediately surged towards the two spots of light within Jianxin's dantian. This sudden change caused Jianxin's expression to be slightly stunned. However, when he understood what was going on, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. Jianxin also knew that in the past, every time he absorbed the energy within the monster core for cultivation, the berserk element contained within the monster core would be absorbed by the two spots of light within his dantian. Therefore, he did not find the current situation strange. Without the berserk element tormenting his body, Jianxin's expression that was filled with pain immediately relaxed. However, Jianxin did not relax in the slightest because of this. He immediately calmed his heart and observed the situation within his body. He saw that when the special element that had been absorbed from the blood of the silver-striped golden snake had just entered his body, the berserk element contained within immediately separated and was absorbed by the two spots of light within his dantian. As for the remaining harmless special element, it slowly gathered towards the snake gallbladder in his abdomen and finally gathered around the snake gallbladder. The speed at which the special element was absorbed from the blood of the silver-striped golden snake was extremely slow. Jianxin stayed in the wooden barrel for an entire day and night before finally completely absorbing the special element contained within the blood into his body. At this moment, within Jianxin's abdomen, the snake gallbladder had already gathered a thick layer of the strange element. After an entire day and night of absorption, due to the essence within the blood being completely absorbed, not only did the color of the blood within the wooden barrel become much lighter, the originally surging stench of blood also disappeared without a trace. Chapter 102. Now, there was only one step left to achieve the body of 10,000 poisons. At the same time, it was also the most important step. Whether or not he could successfully achieve the body of 10,000 poisons all depended on this last step. Now, the most important special factor in the silver-striped golden snake's blood had been completely absorbed by Jianxin. It had gathered around the snake gallbladder in his abdomen, forming a strange substance. This strange substance was the anti-poison substance. The reason why the silver-striped golden snake's blood could cure all poisons was completely because of the pattern's strange anti-poison substance. Now, Jianxin only needed to completely absorb the anti-poison substance from the silver-striped golden snake's blood into his own blood according to the contents of the book. It would perfectly merge with his blood, and the body of 10,000 poisons would be successfully achieved. As long as the anti-poison substance was perfectly merged into his blood, not only would it give his blood the ability to detoxify poisons, but as the blood continued to circulate in his body, even his physical body would gradually be transformed by the blood. It would become a body with super strong anti-poison properties. It would even be directly immune to some weaker poisons, preventing them from causing any harm to the body. Jianxin's expression became serious. Now was not only the last step, but also the most critical moment. This was because the strange anti-poison substance was completely attracted to the snake gallbladder and gathered in his body. Without the snake gallbladder, the anti-poison substance would immediately dissipate. Now, Jianxin had to merge the anti-poison substance around the snake gallbladder into his blood before it was digested. Jianshan concentrated and used his mind to control the flow of the strange substance around the snake gallbladder. However, just as the strange substance left the snake gallbladder, there seemed to be a suction force from the snake gallbladder, firmly sucking in the strange substance that Jianshan had separated with his mind. Seeing this, Jianshan gritted his teeth and immediately increased the control of his mind. Although Jianshan's current strength was very weak, his strength was unquestionable. After he increased the control of his mind, the strange substance was finally successfully separated. Then, under Jianshan's control, it merged into his blood. However, as soon as it fused with the blood, it immediately separated from the blood. This strange factor and the blood were like two opposite magnets. The two were so incompatible with each other that they couldn't fuse at all. Jianshan did not show the slightest sign of discouragement. He once again increased the control of his mind and forcibly merged the strange substance into his blood. Then, his powerful mind stood guard at the side. If the strange substance showed signs of leaving his blood, his mind would immediately surge forward and forcibly merge the strange substance into his blood again. As the blood continued to flow through the blood vessels in his body, the strange substance that Jianshan had forcibly merged into his blood was finally slowly assimilated into his blood. The part of his blood that had assimilated the strange substance actually had a bit of a light green color. However, this light green color was soon melted by the surging blood around him. After assimilating this small part of the strange energy, Jianshan could clearly feel that the blood in his body seemed to have undergone a slight change. He felt that there seemed to be something extra in it. After assimilating this small part of the strange energy, Jianshan did not know how much time had passed. However, a part of the snake bile in his body had been reduced. Jianshan knew that the bile could not exist in his body for a long time. Therefore, without a moment of hesitation, he immediately separated another part of the strange energy from the snake bile and merged it into his blood in the same way as before. This process repeated for an unknown number of times. Jianshan did not know how much time had passed. When he successfully merged the last bit of the strange energy into his blood, the snake bile in his body had almost dissipated. Feeling the obvious changes in his blood, Jianshan let out a long sigh of relief. A feeling of excitement spontaneously rose from the bottom of his heart, causing a trace of happiness and excitement to appear on Jianshan's face. Invulnerable poison body. I never thought that I would actually be able to cultivate the invulnerable poison body. Jianshan screamed from the bottom of his heart. With the 20 years of memories of the Jianghu from his previous life, he knew that the Tianyuan continent was much more dangerous than the Jianghu from his previous life. An invulnerable poison body would bring him great benefits. At the very least, if someone were to set him up in the future, he would not have to worry about food and drink. However, Jianshan was even more clear in his heart that although he had cultivated the invulnerable poison body, it was still in the initial stages. He had not yet reached the perfect invulnerable poison body. His blood had just merged with the poison resistance factor that he had refined from the silver-striped golden snake's blood. However, this fusion was still in the initial stages. He still needed a few days of buffer before he could achieve a perfect fusion. After the blood and the poison resistance factor had perfectly fused, the blood would constantly circulate in his body, gradually transforming his skin, flesh, tendons, bones, and internal organs. No matter if it was his skin, flesh, tendons, bones, organs, or internal organs, as well as the large and small meridians in his body, they would all possess the ability to resist poison. This was the true invulnerable poison body. Jianshan slowly opened his eyes. What entered his eyes was a sea of light. At the end of the horizon in the east, a fiery red sun had just peeked out. Looking at the color of the sky, it was actually early in the morning. The sun had just risen. Jianshan flipped over and jumped out of the wooden barrel filled with blood. He then took out a towel from his space belt and wiped the blood off his body. He then put on the clothes that had been placed beside the wooden barrel. After soaking in the water for a period of time, the blood in the barrel had already decreased by a quarter. The originally overpowering smell of blood had also completely disappeared. Not only that, even the original bright red color of the blood had become a little dull. Looking at the blood in the barrel, Xianxia immediately kicked the barrel fiercely, causing it to topple to the ground. Immediately, the silver-striped golden snake's blood spilled onto the ground. Although the silver-striped golden snake's blood was incomparably precious, all of the essence in the blood had been absorbed by Xianxia. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe the remaining blood as ordinary water. There was simply no use for him at all. After returning to Wake City, Xianxia directly went to a restaurant. After ordering a few dishes, he began to eat. After not eating for an entire day and night, Xianxia's stomach was starting to feel a little hungry. Right now was the peak period for eating, so the restaurant was very lively. There was an endless stream of people going in and out. Very quickly, the tables were filled. The restaurant's waiter was running around busily, continuously serving plate after plate of fragrant and delicious dishes. Chapter 103. Little brother, the seats here are all taken. I wonder if I can sit with you. At this moment, a deep voice came from beside Xianxia. Hearing this, Xianxia raised his head slightly and saw a middle-aged man standing across the table with a smile on his face. His eyes were full of kindness. The middle-aged man was about 40 years old and wore a green robe. However, Xianxia's sharp eyes could see that the robe was made of coarse cloth and belonged to a very cheap type. The middle-aged man had short black hair that was about an inch long. His appearance was ordinary and belonged to the very ordinary type. However, the kindness in his eyes was not something that could be faked casually. Xianxia smiled and nodded, saying, "Since the tables in the restaurant are all taken, and I don't need such a big seat, I should share it with everyone. Please take a seat." "If that's the case, then thank you very much, little brother." The middle-aged man laughed heartily and cupped his hands at Xianxia. Then, he did not stand on ceremony and directly pulled out a chair and sat down. "Young man, give me a caddy of white wine and a caddy of high-quality horse meat." As soon as he sat down, the middle-aged man opened his mouth and called out, "Okay, please wait a moment." The restaurant waiter answered from afar. Xianxia's gaze stayed on the middle-aged man's face for a while. Then, he ignored him and ate his own food. The middle-aged man looked at Xianxia again and laughed. "Little brother, how should I address you?" Xianxia. Xianxia chewed the meat in big mouthfuls and said with a slightly muffled voice, "Xianxia, hee, that's a nice name." The middle-aged man looked up and down at Xianxia and then asked again, "Little brother Xianxia, you must also be a mercenary, right?" Xianxia nodded, "That's right. Due to the limitations of my strength, I'm currently only a D-rank mercenary of the lowest level." The level of a mercenary was related to their own strength and the success rate of completing missions. The lowest D-rank mercenaries were usually rookies who had just advanced to the Saint realm. However, among the D-rank mercenaries, there were still some who did not have talent in cultivation and had not condensed a holy weapon. Although the middle-aged man opposite him showed a very kind attitude, Xianxia did not reveal his exact strength. The middle-aged man smiled in an unconcerned manner. "Little brother, you don't seem to be more than 20 years old. To be able to condense a holy weapon and become a saint at such a young age, your future is limitless." The middle-aged man spoke with sincerity. However, just when he reached there, the middle-aged man suddenly sighed and continued, "Back then, I only managed to condense a holy weapon when I was 25 years old and broke through to the saint realm. Little brother, you've actually reached the saint realm at the age of 20. I think that in the near future, another talented Earth Saint Master will appear on the Tianyuan continent." When he mentioned the words Earth Saint Master, the middle-aged man's face was filled with yearning. Xianxia could not help but look at the middle-aged man again. He had developed a rather good impression of the middle-aged man, but that was it. Condensing a holy weapon at the age of 25 was indeed mediocre on the Tianyuan continent. People like that would basically end up at the level of Great Saint Master. If they did not come across any fortuitous encounters, they would probably never be able to break through to Earth Saint Master. After all, there was an extremely difficult gap between Great Saint Master and Earth Saint Master. This gap was hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of times more difficult than condensing a holy weapon to become a saint. This was because breaking through from Great Saint Master to Earth Saint Master could lead to eternal damnation if one did not pay attention. In the best-case scenario, one would be heavily injured and lose all their cultivation, becoming a cripple for the rest of their lives. In the worst-case scenario, one would directly die. The gap between Great Saint Master and Earth Saint Master was one of life and death. On the Tianyuan continent, there were many people with mediocre talent who would stop at Great Saint Master for the rest of their lives. It was impossible for them to break through to Earth Saint Master, and there were many people who died at this step. There was only a 1% chance of breaking through to Earth Saint Master from Great Saint Master. Xianxia understood this extremely well. This was because he had read about it both in the library of the academy and in the library of the Changyang prefecture. Brother, you probably haven't joined the mercenary group yet, right? The middle-aged man smiled at Xianxia. Xianxia's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He had already guessed what the middle-aged man was going to do next, but he still nodded. That's right. Little brother, why don't you join our flame mercenaries? Although our flame mercenaries is a small, mediocre mercenary group, the people inside are extremely kind. A sliver of anticipation appeared in the middle-aged man's eyes. Previously, he had never thought of joining any mercenary group. In his opinion, no matter which mercenary group he joined, it would only be a burden to him. Not only would it limit his ability to display his abilities, it would also be a great hindrance to his growth. After all, if he wanted to increase his strength quickly, the only way was to absorb the energy within the monster cores. And the amount of monster cores required was an extremely large number. If he entered the magical beast mountain range alone to hunt magical beasts, then all the harvests would naturally belong to him. That way, he could barely keep up with the rate at which he consumed the monster cores. But if he were to join a mercenary group, although it would be easier for him to hunt magical beasts, the distribution of monster cores would become a problem. It could be said that if Xianxia were to join a mercenary group, unless he were to act alone, the distribution of monster cores would not be as good as if he were to hunt magical beasts alone. Seeing Xianxia fall into thought, the middle-aged man did not give up at all. He continued, Brother Xianxia, our flame mercenary group is only a small mercenary group, so we don't have any restrictions on our members. We're not like those large mercenary groups where the various rules and regulations are enough to give people a headache. If you join our mercenary group, it'll be easier and easier for everyone to earn money. After all, you should know that hunting magical beasts is an extremely profitable business, and monster cores can be sold for quite a good price. At the same time, cultivating Saint Force is also essential. Even the corpses of magical beasts are purchased at high prices by the various restaurants. As the saying goes, there's strength in numbers. Once we have more people, even if it's a high-rank magical beast, we can still kill it. Just think about it, once we successfully kill a high-rank magical beast, I'm sure you know how much profit there is. Reaching there, the middle-aged man paused and stared at Xianxia before continuing. If you're alone, you might be able to deal with a few low-class magical beasts, but they won't be able to be sold for much money. In the end, you'll have to expend a lot of effort to kill them. Perhaps the money you'll get from selling them won't even be enough to pay for your treatment. Moreover, we can't rule out the possibility of powerful magical beasts or groups of magical beasts attacking you. Do you think you can deal with the pursuit of several or even several dozen magical beasts? That's impossible. In the end, you'll just lose your life for nothing. Chapter 104. Seeing that Xianxia remained silent, the middle-aged man once again tried to entice him. Little brother Xianxia, you can rest assured regarding the distribution of benefits. Although our flame mercenary group is only a small mercenary group that has only been established a few years ago, the brothers in the group are all true men. We value the friendship between brothers more than money. Once we gain something, we won't mistreat you no matter if you contributed or not. The middle-aged man did not continue speaking at this point. He had already said everything he needed to say. The rest was up to Xianxia. Xianxia furrowed his brow in thought for a long while. Many factors flashed through his mind at lightning speed. In the end, he gritted his teeth and a resolute light flashed through his eyes. He said, All right, I can join your mercenary group, but I have to make things clear first. I won't be bound by any restrictions in the mercenary group. I have the right to not listen to anyone. If I want to leave the mercenary group in the future, you can't stop me for any reason. The middle-aged man looked at Xianxia and asked doubtfully, "Little brother Xianxia, don't you want to find out about the strength of our flame mercenary group and whether we have any enemies? You have to know that if our flame mercenary group has a powerful enemy, it will definitely bring you a lot of trouble if you join us. You might even be in danger of losing your life." Xianxia chuckled and said without a care, "If I'm so cowardly when doing things, how am I supposed to make a name for myself in the world? Since I've decided to join your mercenary group, these factors aren't within the scope of consideration at all." The middle-aged man laughed heartily. Good. Little brother Xianxia, I couldn't tell that you're a good man at such a young age. There are no problems with the conditions you just mentioned. We're only a small, mediocre mercenary group anyway. The purpose of our existence is to earn some money. As for the brothers in the group, we won't restrict them at all. They can leave whenever they want. That's great. Xianxia nodded in satisfaction. The middle-aged man suddenly said, "Oh right, I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm called Kendall, and I'm also the leader of the Flame Mercenaries. Little brother Xianxia, if you don't mind, you can call me Uncle Kendall. I'm not used to those titles of leader and leader." Kendall chuckled towards the end. "All right, then I'll call you Uncle Kendall from now on." Xianxia had a good impression of the middle-aged man in front of him. He was forthright and was a man worth befriending. After that, Xianxia and Kendall finished their meal and left for the mercenary guild to complete the relevant procedures. The procedures for joining a mercenary group were very simple. They completed the procedures very quickly, and Xianxia officially joined the Flame Mercenaries. "Xianxia, let's go. I'll take you to our temporary gathering point and introduce you to our other brothers." With that, Kendall led the way and led Xianxia into the mercenary guild. Along the way, Kendall constantly introduced Xianxia to some matters of the Flame Mercenaries, allowing Xianxia to gradually gain a better understanding of the Flame Mercenaries. The Flame Mercenaries was a small mercenary group that had been established for less than 5 years. Since the mercenaries had been established, the members of the Flame Mercenaries had basically always hunted magical beasts in the magical beast forest to earn money. They rarely took on mercenary missions. As a result, the Flame Mercenaries were still at the DJ rank when they first registered. They hadn't improved at all. Including Kendall, there were a total of 8 members in the Flame Mercenaries. With the addition of Xianxia today, the number of members had increased from 8 to 9. According to Captain Kendall's introduction, among the 9 members, other than him who had the strength of a beginner Saint Master, 5 of the others had the strength of a great saint, while the remaining 3 were still at the saint realm. At this point, Kendall suddenly slapped his forehead and turned to look at Xianxia. He smiled and said, "Right, little brother Xianxia, I still don't know what kind of strength you possess now." Even though Kendall had already guessed that Xianxia would only possess the strength of a saint at such a young age, this was only his own guess. He didn't dare to rashly jump to conclusions before he received a definite answer from Xianxia. Xianxia chuckled and didn't say anything. He directly took out the mercenary badge that represented his identity from his spatial belt. This was the badge that Xianxia had obtained when he first registered. It was a D-rank mercenary badge. Kendall's expression didn't change in the slightest when he saw the badge's grade. He smiled and said, "Now that our Flame Mercenaries have another saint, we're even stronger than before. I'm sure it'll be easier for us to hunt magical beasts." Xianxia followed Kendall for the time it took for a stick of incense to burn before finally arriving in front of a commoner's house made of crushed stones. This commoner's house didn't look very big from the outside. The eaves were already covered in spider webs and the walls had traces of wind and frost left behind by the passage of time. It was clear that this commoner's house had existed in Wake City for many years and no one had taken care of it. Kendall arrived in front of the door and lightly knocked. Not long after, the wooden door opened and a head with dark skin poked out. This was the face of a youth. From his appearance, he seemed to be around 26 or 27 years old. He had a skinny and ordinary face and was the type that could be casually picked out in a crowd. When the skinny youth saw Kendall, he immediately smiled and said, Uncle Kendall, I guess that you'd be back. Afterwards, Xianxia followed Kendall into the house. The lighting in the house was a bit dim, but that didn't affect Xianxia's vision. Xianxia swept his gaze across the house and took in everything inside. The interior of the house wasn't very big and the decorations were very simple. Apart from a few mattresses that took up half of the space, there was only a table and a few stools. It could be said that it was very simple and crude. On the mattresses on the floor, a few people were lazily drinking wine with bored expressions. However, when Leader Kendall entered, everyone's attention was focused on Leader Kendall. Come, brothers, let me introduce you. This is little brother Xianxia. He has just joined our flame mercenaries. Little brother Xianxia is the youngest among us, so please take care of him in the future. As soon as he entered the house, Kendall pulled Xianxia aside and loudly introduced him to everyone. Chapter 105. Everyone in the room immediately shifted their gazes from Captain Kendall to Xianxia. However, when they saw Xianxia's young face, quite a few of them were surprised. However, Xianxia's compliments still left quite a few people with a good impression of him. After all, the first impression was extremely important when strangers met for the first time. Little brother Xianxia, your name should be Xianxia, right? Come, sit down. No matter how old you are, since you've joined our flame mercenaries, we're all brothers in the future. We'll share our joys and sorrows. If anyone bullies you in the future, feel free to come find me. A burly man climbed up from the mattress on the floor and arrived before Xianxia. He placed his right hand on Xianxia's shoulder intimately and pulled him to a chair to sit down. Xianxia smiled. May I know your name, big brother? As he spoke, Xianxia studied the man before him. The man was extremely burly. His upper body was bare, and his sturdy muscles bulged. He seemed to be in his 30s. Even though the room was dim, Xianxia could still clearly see that the man's skin was rather dark, making him seem like a completely black man. His bare upper body was covered in terrifying wounds. Judging from the scars, they should have been caused by ferocious magical beasts. He could tell with a single glance that the man had fought against magical beasts many times. I'm Hoopa. Little brother Xianxia, if you don't mind, you can call me big brother Hoopa in the future. I'm older than you anyway, so you won't lose out even if you call me big brother. The man chuckled as he sat beside Xianxia and poured some water for Xianxia. All right then, I'll call you big brother Hoopa in the future. Xianxia chuckled. At this time, the person who was originally lying on the floor and drinking wine slowly got up. Little brother Xianxia, let me introduce you. Captain Kendall came to Xianxia's side and pointed at the other people in the room as he introduced them to Xianxia. Apart from Xianxia and Captain Kendall, there were 6 other people in the house. All of them were men in their 30s or 40s. What surprised Xianxia was that there was a pair of twin brothers named Zhou Dekai and Zhou Shaokai. They were 28 years old and both had the strength of a primary great saint. They looked exactly the same. If it wasn't for the scar on one of them's forehead, it was really hard to tell which twin was the older one and which was the younger one. Other than Hoopa, who was 32 years old and was a beginner great saint, the remaining 4 were called Yunxian, Xiao Dao, and Changningfeng. Yunxian was very tall, but very skinny. He looked like a scholar. He was 25 years old and possessed the strength of a mid-level saint. Xiao Dao was short and his skinny frame was like a skeleton. He looked much thinner than Yunxian. Xiao Dao was the youngest person in the flame mercenaries aside from Xianxia. He was only 22 years old and possessed the strength of a mid-level saint. Changningfeng was a young man who looked very calm. He was 2 years younger than Hoopa, just 30 years old. However, he was a bit stronger than Hoopa as he was a mid-level great saint. Xianxia, our flame mercenaries only have these few people. The other 2 went to the market to buy things. I'm sure they'll be back soon, said Captain Kendall. Our flame mercenaries have an operation tomorrow. All the brothers in the group have to go. Little brother Xianxia, I wonder if you'll be participating in tomorrow's operation? Our group doesn't have that many broken rules. If you don't want to participate, no one will force you. It's completely voluntary. Operation? What kind of operation? Xianxia blinked and asked in confusion. Captain Kendall rolled his eyes at Jianchen before grabbing the jug of alcohol on the table and taking a large gulp. Only then did he say, "What else can we do? Of course we're going to the mountain range of magical beasts to hunt magical beasts. After all, I established the Flame Mercenaries to gather a few more people to hunt magical beasts. With our current strength, we can only make some money from hunting magical beasts and selling magic cores." "Of course I'm going. Since we're going to hunt magical beasts, what reason do I have to not go?" Jianchen chuckled and immediately agreed. "Little brother Jianchen, don't worry. Although you're not very strong, as long as our group has any gains, you'll get a share. If your contributions are great, we'll even distribute more benefits according to your contributions." The one who spoke was Hu Pe. "Jianchen, the environment in the mountain range of magical beasts is extremely vile. Moreover, this operation will be extremely dangerous. If we come across a Class 3 magical beast that even the captain and big brothers can't defeat, it's very likely that we'll lose our lives. So, Jianchen, you should reconsider." The person who spoke this time was actually Xiao Dao, who was not much older than Jianchen. Xiao Dao stared at Jianchen with shining eyes. His face was filled with sincerity, and his voice was slightly solemn. He was sincerely reminding Jianchen. Hearing Xiao Dao's words, the faces of the other people in the room became rather solemn. In particular, Class 3 magical beasts placed quite a bit of pressure on them. Although Captain Kendall was a beginner Saint Master, he could only protect himself if he came across a Class 3 magical beast. After all, magical beasts of the same level were often much stronger than humans of the same level. On the Tianyuan continent, it was basically impossible for a person to kill a magical beast of the same level or stronger without an extremely high-level cultivation technique or powerful battle skill. Moreover, Saint Force had to be of an attribute. Otherwise, the only option left was to flee. On the other hand, although Captain Kendall was a beginner Saint Master, his Saint Force did not have an attribute. His attacks were much weaker than Saint Force with an attribute. Although he could put up a fight against a regular Class 3 magical beast, he could only protect himself. If he came across a powerful Class 3 magical beast that excelled in speed, even Captain Kendall would find it very difficult to escape. In the end, he would only end up as food for the magical beast. However, no one in the room noticed the faint disdain in Jianchen's eyes when he heard about Class 3 magical beasts. Back when he was only a beginner Great Saint, he had already begun hunting Class 3 magical beasts. It could be said that regular Class 3 magical beasts were no threat to Jianchen at all, unless he encountered something strange like the golden-striped silver snake. But now, Jianchen's strength had reached the level of a mid-Great Saint. He was much more powerful than a beginner Great Saint. In other words, Jianchen was completely capable of taking on several Class 3 magical beasts by himself. Chapter 106. P.S. There was no electricity at home for an entire day yesterday, so I was unable to write or update. This chapter basically makes up for yesterday's. There's one more chapter for today, but it's rather late. Afterwards, Jianchen began to chat with the members of the Flame Mercenaries. They all talked about some of the interesting things they had seen and heard on the Tianyuan continent in the past few years. Jianchen's relationship with the members of the Flame Mercenaries had become much closer unknowingly. However, it was worth mentioning that the members of the Flame Mercenaries, including Captain Kendall, were all straightforward and loyal people. Although Jianchen had only revealed the insignia of AD-class mercenary group to them, they did not look down on Jianchen because of that. On the Tianyuan continent, where strength was respected, people like that were rare. As a result, Jianchen's impression of the Flame Mercenaries immediately improved. Unknowingly, it was already noon. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. It must be Kabudis and the others. A sliver of joy appeared in Xiao Dao's eyes when he heard the knock. He immediately went to open the door. Jianchen looked outside as well. He knew that the other two members of the Flame Mercenaries had probably returned. The door opened and two clothed people walked in. One of them seemed to be a young man in his 30s. He had a medium build, around the same height as Jianchen. His bright eyes flickered with interest. The other person was a middle-aged man. From his appearance, he seemed to be around the same age as Captain Kendall. A gleam of light would flash through his indifferent eyes from time to time. "Kabutis, dear, you finally returned." Captain Kendall smiled. "Come, let me introduce you. This is Xianxia, a new member of our flame mercenaries. We'll all be brothers in the future, so we have to take care of each other." Afterward, Kendall looked at Xianxia and said, "Brother Xianxia, that young man is called Kabutis. He's not very powerful, but he's the smartest person in our mercenaries. Almost all of the decisions we make are made by Kabutis. The other person who's around my age is Deer. He's also the most powerful person in our mercenaries. He's a high-level Great Saint. I believe he'll be able to break through to Great Saint in 2 or 3 years and become a Saint Master." Afterward, Xianxia, Kabutis, and Deer exchanged some pleasantries with one another. They basically got to know one another. "Xianxia, I see that you're around 20 years old. I wonder what kind of strength you possess now?" Kabutis stared at Xianxia with bright eyes, his tone filled with curiosity. Xianxia smiled and didn't give a direct answer. Instead, he took out a mercenary badge from his spatial belt and said with a smile, "I became AD rank mercenary not long ago." "Oh." Kabutis nodded slightly. He took a deep look at Xianxia, a trace of undetectable contemplation in his eyes. He then took off his spatial belt and handed it to Captain Kendall. "Uncle Kendall, I've already prepared everything we need. We're just waiting for tomorrow to set off." Captain Kendall took the spatial belt from Kabutis and said, "Good. Now that all the supplies have been prepared, let's set off tomorrow morning. This time, we'll have to slaughter a few more magical beasts. Brother Xianxia, do you have any objections?" "No, I'll just follow Uncle Kendall's arrangements," Xianxia said with a smile. "All right, then let's all have a good rest today and recover our energy. We'll prepare for a big fight tomorrow." After leaving the small house, Xianxia strolled around Wacker by himself. Xianxia didn't care about tomorrow's battle at all. With the Flame Mercenary Group's strength, if they wanted to easily kill magical beasts without suffering any casualties, they could only choose rank 2 magical beasts. As for rank 3 magical beasts, although the Flame Mercenary Group had 1 Saint Master and 4 Great Saint Masters, it was still a bit of a stretch for them to deal with rank 3 magical beasts. Moreover, regardless of whether the Flame Mercenary Group was hunting rank 2 or 3 magical beasts, they wouldn't be able to pose a threat to Xianxia unless they encountered a rank 4 magical beast. Moreover, even if they did encounter a rank 4 magical beast, although Xianxia wouldn't be able to defeat it, he still had a bit of confidence in escaping. Therefore, Xianxia didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure for tomorrow's trip to the magical beast mountain range. After discussing with the other members of the Flame Mercenary Group about tomorrow's gathering time, Xianxia used the excuse of replenishing his supplies as an excuse to leave the dark house and stroll around Wacker City by himself. Although Xianxia had already been in Wacker City for a few days, most of his time was spent hiding in the magical beast mountain range. The amount of time he truly spent in the city was probably only around 10 days. Moreover, most of these 10 days were spent cultivating. It could be said that he didn't have any time to play. Therefore, taking advantage of his free time, Xianxia planned to take a good stroll around Wacker City. Although Wacker City didn't cover a large area, it still covered an area of several hundred kilometers. The entire city was surrounded by a layer of thick and tall city walls. If an ordinary person hurried along, it would take several hours to walk from the east to the west of the city. Due to Wacker City's geographical advantage and its proximity to the magical Beast Mountain range, the city was bustling with activity almost every day. There were many people moving about, and almost a third of Wacker City's area was occupied by private restaurants. As Xianxia strolled along the main street, his curious gaze constantly swept past the stalls on both sides of the street. Almost all of the stall owners were mercenaries. Of course, there were also a few merchants. Aside from a few strange items, there were also some herbs, monster cores, and so on. However, most of these monster cores were of the first class. There were very few second-class monster cores, so they didn't attract Xianxia's attention at all. Although there were many monster core buyers on the Tianyuan continent, if mercenaries sold their monster cores to these buyers, they would only be able to get around 70% of the original value of the monster core. As a result, many mercenaries would rather sell their monster cores at a lower price than the market price. As a result, there were many mercenaries who would set up their own stalls to sell their monster cores. Even so, as everyone on the Tianyuan continent needed monster cores, there were still many rich people who would spend money to buy monster cores from these mercenaries. As a result, the stalls that sold monster cores were always surrounded by people bargaining with the stall owners. Just as Jianchen was leisurely strolling along the street, the purple and green spots of light in his dantian suddenly began to violently pulsate. With the pulsation of these two spots of light, Jianchen's dantian was greatly affected. The originally calm lake surface instantly became turbulent. Even the saint force in his body was almost out of Jianchen's control. Chapter 107. Within Jianchen's dantian, the two spots of light, one purple and one green, were constantly flickering and pulsating. Circles of purple and green halos were constantly emitted from these two spots of light, forming a visible radiance that spread throughout his dantian. At the same time, Jianchen's mind suddenly had a strange feeling. At this moment, the two spots of light in Jianchen's mind seemed to have become sentient beings with their own independent thoughts. This was because suddenly, Jianchen could inexplicably feel that the two spots of light were emitting an enormous feeling of joy and excitement. Yes, Jianchen could actually feel that the two spots of light in his dantian were displaying an abnormal state due to great joy and excitement. However, after knowing this conclusion, Jianchen was flabbergasted. It was so unbelievable, and in Jianchen's eyes, one could see a lifeless expression. At this moment, a strange feeling suddenly entered Jianchen's mind, as if it had appeared out of thin air in his mind. This was because at this moment, Jianchen could clearly feel that the two spots of light in his dantian, one purple and one green, seemed to have established a subtle connection with something. This kind of connection was somewhat similar to a spiritual connection, but also seemed to have locked onto something. This kind of feeling, Jianchen could actually clearly feel it. Jianchen forcibly suppressed the shock in his heart, took a deep breath, and then slightly turned his head. Following this inexplicable feeling that suddenly appeared in his mind, he raised his eyes and looked towards a street stall not far from him. The owner of the street stall was a young man of about 30 years of age. In front of the young man, there were a few rank 1 magic nuclei and a few strange things on the street stall. Jianchen's gaze was fixed on a fist-sized white stone placed in the corner of the street stall. The white stone was in an irregular shape, completely white, and looked completely unremarkable. It was simply no different from an ordinary stone. Because of the inexplicable feeling that suddenly appeared in his mind, Jianchen was very clear in his heart that this seemingly unremarkable white stone had caused the two spots of light in his dantian to move. This was because within the two spots of light, there was an extremely weak spiritual connection tightly locked onto the white stone, just like a child tightly hugging his favorite treasure. Moreover, the excitement and joy that came from the heart could even be clearly felt by Jianchen. Jianchen's expression did not change as he slowly walked to the street stall, squatting down, and reached out to grab the fist-sized white stone. Just as he was about to use his strength to pick it up, his expression became slightly serious, and his eyes revealed a trace of surprise. This strange white stone that was only the size of a fist was surprisingly heavy. When he picked it up, the strange white stone actually did not budge at all. What a heavy stone! Jianchen couldn't help but exclaim, then his right hand clasped the white stone tightly. With a sudden force, he finally lifted the stone slowly. "Little brother, are you interested in this strange stone?" At this time, the stall owner said to Jianchen with a smile. Jianchen slowly took this strange white stone in front of his eyes and looked at it carefully. Although this white stone was only the size of a fist, its weight was a terrifying 100 pounds. If Jianchen's strength had not reached the intermediate level of Great Saint, even if he wanted to pick it up with one hand, it would be very difficult for him to do so. And just when Jianshan picked up this strange white stone, he could clearly feel that the excitement and joy from the purple and green light spots in his dantian were getting stronger and stronger. For this, Jianshan also felt very puzzled and incredible because only intelligent creatures with life could transmit such emotions. At this moment, such emotions appeared in the purple and green light spots in his dantian. Could it be that these two light spots also have their own consciousness? Or they already have the ability to think independently? When Jianshan came to this conclusion, he couldn't help but tremble. Fine sweat beads appeared on his forehead, and he felt that he could not control his future. But then he let out a helpless sigh in his heart because Jianshan really couldn't do anything about the purple and green light spots in his dantian. There was no way to get rid of them. These two light spots were not in Jianshan's control at all. Even if he wanted to get rid of them, he didn't have the ability to do so. AI, if it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Forget it, I don't care about them. Anyway, I've already died once. What else can I not let go of? At most, I'll just die again. Jianshan thought secretly in his heart, then he stopped thinking about the purple and green light spots. Instead, he looked at the white stone in front of him seriously. The white stone was made of an extremely unique material. Even with Jianshan's eyesight, he was unable to tell whether it was made of stone or iron. Apart from being extremely heavy, the white stone was extremely tough as well. Afterward, Jianshan mobilized his saint force and slowly infused it into the white stone through his arm. However, as soon as his saint force came in contact with the surface of the white stone, it seemed to have encountered a sturdy fortress, unable to advance any further. The density of the white stone was extremely great. Even Jianshan's saint force was unable to penetrate it. Jianshan finally moved his gaze away from the white stone and looked at the stall owner. May I ask what kind of stone this is and what its uses are? Hearing this, the stall owner chuckled and said a little embarrassedly, "Little brother, to be honest, I don't know what this strange stone is and I don't know what its uses are either. However, it is extremely heavy. Just from this point alone, I can conclude that this stone is definitely not ordinary." "Then where did you obtain this stone?" Jianshan continued to ask as he stared at the stall owner with shining eyes. Hearing this, the stall owner frowned slightly. After thinking for a while, he said, "Little brother, many people have asked me this before, but I never told them. Today, I've found you pleasing to the eye, so I'll tell you." Speaking to this point, the stall owner paused and pointed at the white stone, continuing, "To be honest, I actually found this stone in the magical Beast Mountain range." Hearing this, Jianshan's gaze once again landed on the white rock. He wasn't surprised that the stall owner had picked up this white rock in the mountain range of magical beasts. After all, everyone had their own opportunities. Even a farmer could dig up gold and treasure from the ground. Seeing that Jianshan seemed to be very interested in the white stone, the stall owner said again, "Little brother, this white stone has been with me for many years now. If it weren't for the fact that I urgently need money right now, I wouldn't be selling it. I can see that you are very interested in this stone, so why don't you buy it?" Chapter 108. This. The stall owner looked at Jianshan's face and hesitated slightly. Although the stall owner knew that the strange stone was definitely something special, he really did not know what it was used for. In order to understand the origins of the stone, he had looked through a few books regarding rare treasures, but he still failed to find an answer. He had even asked many of his good friends, but they were all for naught. After thinking about it again and again, he finally made up his mind to sell the stone. It was just a pity that basically no one on the Tianyuan continent knew the use of the strange stone. Although there were many people who were curious about the stone in the few months he had set up the stall and wanted to buy it, all of them immediately put down the stone and left when they heard the price. This was because the stall owner knew that the stone was definitely something special. Even though he did not know what it was used for, he still wanted to sell it for a good price. As a result, many people gave up on buying the stone without any hesitation when they heard the price. The stall owner was undecided when Jianshan asked about the price of the stone. He really did need a large sum of money right now. It could be said that the stone was the only thing on him that could earn him a certain amount of money. If the price was too high, he was worried that Xianxia would immediately put down the stone and leave like everyone else. If the price was too low, the stall owner would be unwilling to give up. As a result, the stall owner was conflicted when Xianxia asked about the price. He had no idea what price to change. After hesitating for quite a while, the stall owner finally said, "Brother, if you've really taken an interest in this strange stone, just name a price." Xianxia stared at the stall owner with interest. He gently smiled. "You should be the one selling the item. Logically speaking, you should be the one to name the price. Why do I have to name the price?" The stall owner became slightly embarrassed when he heard that. He bitterly smiled. "Brother, it's not that I don't want to name the price, but I'm afraid that I'll scare you once I name the price. There have been many people who were interested in this stone in the past, but as soon as they heard the price, they didn't even discuss it. They just put down the stone and left." "Oh, then how much do you think this stone is worth?" Xianxia became interested and asked. In his heart, he had already made up his mind to buy the stone. Although he didn't know what the white stone was for, it was definitely something extraordinary since it could cause the two specks of light in his dantian to react strangely. Perhaps the stone could even resolve the two specks of light in his dantian. Therefore, Xianxia was determined to get the stone. The stall owner looked at Xianxia's expression, then clenched his teeth and said, "Brother, if you're really interested in this stone, I'll sell it to you at a cheaper price. What do you think about this price?" As he spoke, the stall owner stretched out his hand and waved it in front of him. Seeing the stall owner's actions, Xianxia's eyes revealed a trace of ridicule. He then said in an uncertain tone, "Could it be 50 gold coins?" Hearing this, the stall owner's face turned red. The price that Xianxia named was worlds apart from the price that he had in mind. The stall owner sighed helplessly and said, "Brother, I won't beat around the bush with you. Let's be frank. I'm selling this stone for 500 purple coins. Do you want it?" As he spoke, the stall owner stared at Xianxia. "What? 500 purple coins? Are you kidding me?" Xianxia exclaimed in a low voice. He stared at the stall owner in disbelief, especially the three words, purple coins. Xianxia especially emphasized it. 500 purple coins was equivalent to 50,000 gold coins. The stall owner's face turned slightly red. From Xianxia's expression, the stall owner understood that he couldn't sell the stone for 500 purple coins. "Brother, I think you should name a price. If the price is acceptable to me, I can sell it to you," the stall owner said bitterly. Xianxia sucked in a deep breath when he heard that. Afterwards, he studied the strange, white rock in his hand again. He became hesitant. After a while, Xianxia seemed to have finally made up his mind. He said, "I'll give you 100 purple coins at most. It's up to you whether you want to sell it or not." As he spoke, Xianxia stared at the stall owner. In his heart, he was also nervous. Although Xianxia was determined to get this stone, it would be best if he could buy it at a cheap price. Moreover, 100 purple coins was not a small sum for a small mercenary like the stall owner. Moreover, Xianxia could tell that the stall owner, who was only in his 30s, was a smart person. He definitely could not show that he was determined to get the stone. Once the stall owner saw through it, no one could guarantee that the stall owner would not ask for a sky-high price. Moreover, there was another reason. Xianxia could not reveal that he possessed too much money. Otherwise, there would be quite a few people who would come looking for trouble on the treacherous Tianyuan continent. Although Xianxia did not fear Saint Masters with his current strength, it was still best to avoid trouble like this as much as possible. Hearing that Xianxia was willing to pay 100 purple coins for the stone, the stall owner's eyes immediately filled with joy. However, he quickly hid it and pretended to be troubled. He muttered, "Brother, do you think you can add a point?" Xianxia faintly smiled and gently shook his head. Xianxia could clearly see the joy in the stall owner's eyes. Seeing that Xianxia was not willing to increase the price, the stall owner's eyes filled with disappointment. He clenched his teeth and thought about it. In the end, he firmly nodded his head. "All right, 100 purple coins it is. Deal." Afterwards, Jianchen directly pulled out a large amount of purple coins from his space belt. He counted 100 of them and directly tossed them to the stall owner. At the same time, he placed the strange white stone into his own space belt and immediately left. Although Jianchen really wanted to study the use of the strange white stone, it was clearly not a good place to do so in a crowded street. However, as soon as Jianchen left, two people immediately noticed him. The two of them were young men in their 20s, and they were skinny. Lulu 3, looks like we've come across a fat sheep today. The skinny young man on the left stared in the direction Jianchen had left in. He spoke in a low voice with a hint of excitement in his voice. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.